What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Headhunter Hideout. I'm super excited today. We have Nicki Tyler in the house. Nicki, why don't you go ahead and just give a quick introduction for anyone who's out there that doesn't know who you are, and then we'll get into the main conversation here.
Sweet. Yes, I'm actually Nicki Tyler Garcia now because I got married last year, Joel, and I've been an executive hunter for about 7.5, 8 years. So I'm a mom of a 6-year-old daughter. I'm a big golden doodle lover. I've got 3 of them. I could never have enough. Yes. And we eat a lot of authentic Mexican food in our family because we love to eat. And if I'm not working, I'm probably playing soccer still.
Who's your favorite team?
Oh, Barcelona. I'm gonna see Messi play live before he calls it quits, I promise. But yes, I am an avid soccer lover. So here we are, recruiter, mom, soccer player, taco eater, and I love coupons.
So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you got into the recruitment industry. And I always love to hear that story.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay, so everybody knows you don't go to college and wake up and think, God, I'm going to be a recruiter someday. True story. I was in between jobs. I was unemployed. I had been working in accounting for way too long. And I was home with my parents. I was online playing Halo with my little brother at the time. And it was when Career Builder had first come out, and I applied for my first staffing manager position at 2 a.m. And my very first boss ever, Laura Owen, and I swear if you were out there, this is a shout out to you, lady. She called me for an interview at 7 a.m. and I probably had 4 hours of sleep. 5 interviews later, I was a staffing manager with Robert Half, and the rest is history. But it was not by design. I thought I was getting my first HR gig and I was going to break the ceiling and go design organizations, and fate had a different plan for me. So here I am, 14 and a half years later.
And I was going to say, how long were you at Robert Half for?
Almost 5 years. Yeah, I was in the Visalia office where I was raised, and moved to Modesto midway through my career, and I've been here ever since.
Well, I know we've got Karen out here. So Karen said, hi, Joel. And she said she's logging off. But anyone else who's out there, if you've got questions on the recruitment industry, please chat those in and we'll get to those. So why don't you walk us through a little bit about, what happened with Robert Half? I know you people have mixed experiences, I think there. So walk us through a little bit about that story and kind of how you ended up in where you are now.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's asked that in a long time, Joel. You're putting me on the spot. True story. Robert Half was the best training I probably had ever gotten from a nuts and bolts perspective in terms of where the money is going to come from, how to focus on the revenue generating activities. But what I guess where it kind of went south for me personally is that I'm an extremely relational person. And so when I'm bound by metrics that I think are, a bit outlandish and unattainable, despite my production numbers being good, I was, frowned on for having long client meetings and long interviews, and everything I do is long. I mean, I just get in the moment, and I like to get underneath the first and second and third layer with people. And I got in a lot of trouble for that. It was you need to keep your meetings this long, your messaging this way. And I'm a little unorthodox. So I think eventually I became a misfit in that, publicly traded kind of world and sector. And what attracted me to kind of get outside of that had just a lot to do with how our contract terms laid out. So I don't know. I just kind of felt like I outgrew the temp desk, and I became more in love with the career story and where people were trying to go, rather than just plug and play into jobs to make money. I mean, I started right before the recession hit. So people needed work, and they would take anything you threw at them. And that worked for a short time, but eventually reality sunk back in, and people were miserable having accepted something that maybe wasn't the right thing for them, but it put food on my table. So I kind of started at a weird evolution. in the work world. So I don't know. I don't know if it's a blessing in disguise, but it was the best training ever. But I definitely did not fit that mold long term.
So in your position right now, I mean, walk me through some of those differences that you see in what you're doing now compared to what things were like when you were with Robert Half. Because obviously, I totally relate to that as well. Like the big corporate structure and obviously just like the roadmap on how to do things. But walk me through like what the difference is like between kind of what you're doing now and you know how that works with the candidates that you're working with the clients you're working with as well.
Yeah. So I guess I never lost the fundamentals. Like I embrace the interview, I embrace the reference check, and I embrace the referrals because it's like the circle of life. And if I can sprinkle in an ad call from time to time where I see one of my clients or someone I know is hiring, of course, I'm going to, cordially reach out. But I've kind of gotten to the point in my career where, and the way we run our shop, even with the team I'm with now, we're more focused on the needs of both parties. And if it takes 2 months, 3 months, 4 months to find the right person, we're like settled and okay with, I'm going to send you 1 or 2, maybe excellent people that are going to check all of the things I know are going to make you happy, versus just getting people in front of the client and then leaving them to their own demise. I mean, I think I've kind of more pivoted my style to what outside of the job is in it for that candidate. I mean, in terms of like growth and what's going to make them happy, what's worked for them in the past in terms of like teams and the types of people they've learned from. So I think our model has more to do with them really realizing what they want in their future. And that not just goes for the candidate, but for the client, like where are they headed, right? Like what's their future look like? Ideally, what are they hoping to see? If you don't spend the time to understand either of those, you could potentially align people that are going 2 different directions, north on 5 and south on 101. Yeah. And ultimately, I think that that's what leads to these situations where you wake up in 6 months and you're thinking, God, if I would have known this stuff, I would have never taken this opportunity. And also realizing too that some job opportunities, some positions in a company have an expiration date. Like you can't expect someone to sit in this job forever. They're eventually going to grow out of that job if they're any good, or they're going to get stagnant. And I just don't think with the technology we have today, we can afford to not understand that that's reality and not to be offended by it. Just embrace the idea, hey, I might only have this staff accountant for 2 years, maybe a year and a half before they're either going to want more. And if I can't give it to them, be happy for them to get it elsewhere. But we get so caught up in the divorce that, and then, we as recruiters get a bad rap because someone didn't stay forever. So it's a catch-22. It's being realistic about the shelf life of the job and the shelf life of the person and thinking, hey, if I can get 2 or 3 years out of this, I'll do it. So our mentality has more to do with where people are trying to go, right? Like, do they want to stick around that area? Do they want to move away? I don't know. Do you have family and kids? I mean, all the things we hate talking about, right? Because I'm in California, so I literally recruit with handcuffs every day, which is so much fun. But you can get people to really, truly open up. Our process will work really well for them. But if they're very closed, it's awkward. I won't get very far with them. So, whereas before, I don't know. I feel like you're just working under these very strict parameters. And now it's an ebb and flow. Like some of my closest friends have been candidates or clients at one point. And I think that just kind of shows you the level of like intimacy that we invite, because I can't expect them to get real with me if I'm not going to get real with them. So I just put it all out there.
No, I love that. And I think, when I'm looking on LinkedIn, that one of the biggest, I think, complaints you hear about recruiters on the platform is it's just so transactional. And, I think if you want to be in recruiting for a long time, you have to get past that point, and it has to, at some point, it has to turn into real relationships, and on both sides, right? With candidates and with clients, and it's just such a unique business because most businesses are like, okay, our client is number one. And I think that is true within recruitment. But you also, it's like your candidate is also number one as well. And I've heard people go both ways and say, well, we're different than other recruitment agencies. We 100% focus on the client, but you can't get away really. You can't treat candidates like dirt and expect to win. So I think it's just a fine balance between the two. Now so you joined the recruitment world in the middle of the recession. Obviously, we're in such a unique time period right now. Are there any similarities that you kind of saw from this recent time with COVID and kind of the beginning of the pandemic to that recession? Did you see some kind of similarities? And I'd love to hear any of those similarities that you saw.
Oh God, I'm trying to even think. When I, like the first 8 months of my job, it was like the phones never stopped ringing, and it was both, clients needing employees and finding people was really tough. So if you even got a relatively decent human in the door, you probably had 2 to 3 jobs for them. And then we all jumped off the cliff together. I feel like the beginning of COVID resembled some of that fall off feeling where, like the healthcare industry, especially, I mean, that carried me through the recession. So I was like, oh, don't worry, we got the COVID. We're going to get through the pandemic because healthcare is going to carry us, right? Well, healthcare fell off the cliff too. Offices weren't seeing patients. It wasn't like essential. And, we have a healthcare division right now. And we just watched all those people just go without work. And I thought, oh my God, what are we going to do? So yeah, there was that moment, 45 days maybe, where I remember my colleague Roy and I don't even know if he's listening today, but he and I sat down and well, actually on a phone call thinking like, we can't just let all these healthcare people just sit at home. And so we created this 24-hour wellness temperature checking program, and that took off like a bandit. But then our other book of business, our core book, our professional office stuff, didn't slow up that much. A lot of our customers laid off temporarily and took a pivot until they could get everybody to work from home. But I mean, we felt maybe a quick dip and then it just shot off into the sky. And so then we became, like, jokingly, the team of no sleep, because now we're running 24-hour facilities, which our professional search team had pretty much never done ever. And then managing, customers' expectations, and then managing COVID expectations. I felt like the recession was it was very desperate, where COVID has felt more like you just never knew where to turn. You're like, am I doing the right thing? You always second guess yourself. And I feel like that's been the biggest difference. You're on hyper alert, but they're for like different reasons, where in COVID, you're like making sure you're not doing something illegal. Should I require a negative COVID test? No, I shouldn't. Should I, quarantine this person? How many degrees of separation from contact? Versus recession, where it was straight, pricing was crazy low. And then you're fighting, very few job opportunities. And in reality, everyone wanted to work until they could find something better. So you knew they were only going to last so long. So they're both volatile for different reasons. I don't know which one I would pick over the other, though, if I had to do it all over again. Would I go pandemic or would I go COVID? I don't know.
Hopefully neither.
But they all gave you a different angst, like a concern, right, for the people you're serving, which is the medical team. Are they being safe? Are they getting what they need? Versus, recession, where you saw people losing their houses. I mean, there's nothing worse than a recruiter working with someone and knowing that, like, if you don't work hard enough, that person might not have food or might not have a house tomorrow. I mean, that's a lot of pressure. We shouldn't carry it. But if you really care about people, I mean, I know I do. It bothered me, like daily. It bothered me. It was a hard thing to sleep on most days.
Yeah.
It was not fun.
No, I think, looking back at the recession, I was actually in the banking industry, and it was like, I remember that. So I just worked retail banking, helping people out with mortgages and that type of stuff. And it was like every single day somebody would come in with like loan modification documents and like people, just underwater in their houses and just struggling to get by. So I saw a lot of that firsthand. But like you said, I mean, if you care about people, when someone, particularly if someone's been on the job search for a long time, it's tough because you want to be an advocate for them and you want to help them out.
Yeah.
But then you obviously you got to balance your own goals with that as well. I wanted just to go to, it looks like Christy said, she said, "Hi, Joel, no questions. Just can't give enough praise to Nicki. She's amazing at what she does in general." And then Cole just said, "I love the background story. I've heard of senior staffing professionals asking staffing recruiters for roles in their industry, then becoming a staffing guru themselves." Very true. And then Karen said, "I've been approached by recruiters to go into the talent search, having gained experience in the creative field. I've hired before just in my role as a creative director, but never thought of going in the recruitment. What would be your advice?" We can get to that one, Karen. I think that's a great question. Why don't we? I'd be curious to hear from you, Nicki. Like if somebody, because right now, I mean, every single recruitment firm I talk to is hiring, every company I see is like hiring recruiters. So it's super unique time. But what advice would you give to somebody right now for like, if they were to get into the industry, what would be some advice you'd give to them?
Well, number one, and I'm going to speak pretty yucky here for a second. Representing the human commodity is the messiest, most unpredictable commodity out there. I mean, you're dealing with one person, hypothetically, but you got to remember they've got a sphere of people that affect every decision that they make. And so third-party recruiting, like with what we do and getting into the recruitment industry, you have to really look at yourself in the mirror and say, would I become jaded a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now? Because recruiting can make you lose faith in humankind. People will do things, lie to you, say things that are unthinkable. And the true is reverse. I mean, I've heard candidates tell me about stuff recruiters have done to them, and I'm just like yanking my hair out. But you got to remember, humans have a lot, and I'm going to call it baggage, and I don't mean it in a mean way. I actually mean it I got a lot of baggage. I've got family, in-laws, dogs, a house I'm remodeling. It's like, it's never ending. Our lives are just never ending chaos. And so remembering that if you get into recruitment, you have to be able to care about the person enough to know when to walk away and when to support a decision that you might not agree with, but not make them feel bad, even if you don't think it's the right decision. And still being able to be supportive no matter the decision that they're going to make. And I say that because we get paid when the person shows up to work. So you might work on something for 4 months, and the night before they're supposed to start, shit hits the fan and they can't take the job. And it feels like a lot of lost effort. But if you are the type of person that can handle that and accept it and learn from it and move on and start over again, and you're like one that can pick yourself up off the ground, recruiting is going to be easy for you because you can take a no, you can take being disappointed, you can take getting your feelings hurt for a little bit, because it's exhausting. I mean, I probably cried 5 to 6 times my first year in the business. Just the insane things that happen that people will say or do or not do. And it makes you look bad. And that's the tough part, is you're an agent of both parties. But for whatever reason, you always will be the punching bag if things go wrong. Now, if they go right, you're like the hero. But if it doesn't go right, I mean, there's a lot of responsibility in it, and not to be taken lightly. And I I will say I don't like seeing people jump into recruiting during a market where it feels like it's hot, because like, oh my God, it's lucrative. Oh my God. Just making sure they get in it for the right reasons. And just really check yourself before you do it, because people will smell the BS real quick. And you don't want to be that person that got in it for the wrong reasons with the wrong expectations and then got out and was like just disappointed with everyone and everything, because you will get to that point. You will break multiple times in the first year.
It's so true. It's so true. I love the way and it's a great point. I mean, this is a type of market, which is exactly what you're talking about. It's a hot market. It could easily be to be able to jump into things right now and think, oh, wow, this is at least in terms of getting job orders and which, in years prior, that's probably been more the challenge on the business development side. Now it's much more, okay, there's lots of jobs open. How am I finding the candidates? So, but I like what you said, really thinking like, why am I in it? And then I think a lot of people do achieve, they get really great financial results, but that will get you to a certain point. And then it's really got to come down to like, what's your why? Like, do I care about the people and the clients I'm working with and the industry that I'm in? And it looks like Whitney just said, very true, Nicki, the relationship aspect in the staffing industry is the most important. To be in this industry, you must have the care factor for all. So well said, Whitney. I couldn't agree more. What are some of the challenges you are seeing right now, though, in terms of, obviously it's a hot market, everybody's busy. What are some of the big challenges that you're seeing that maybe we didn't see 6 months ago, 9 months ago, a year ago?
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like everybody's trying to hire, and I say everybody, and I mean cross industry, retail all the way to the food sections, ag, everything. However, the incentive not to work is really high. And so you see a lot of people struggle with the balance, right? Like, should I go back or should I wait? I think the summer is going to be odd because school's going to be out. And, from where I'm sitting, I cannot get people to consider leaving a job if they've been stable through the whole time of the pandemic, because they've been stable through the pandemic, right? Like, they watched everything around them kind of weirdly and oddly crumble. But if they've had a stable gig, they're a little bit more reluctant to like leave because they've made it through, right? Like, they're coming out on this back end and they're thinking, well, I'm kind of stable. Why would I jump right now? Right. And I do a lot of HR, like high level HR searches, and HR's been like the crux of what keeps companies like compliant right now. And if those HR people have it good, or they have a high level of responsibility in their jobs, they feel guilty leaving. It's not that they wouldn't, it's just like they care, again, back to the basics, and they don't want to go. I think the other part of it is we do a lot of contract work. And, traditionally finding temporaries in a professional office setting, whether it's admin or accounting, has always been tough. Okay. That's always been difficult. But now it's like worse than ever. And I don't know if it's that people don't want to work, or if it's they really have a tough dynamic at home and they're afraid to work, or if, and I do get this expectation, everyone wants remote, they want to be able to work from home. And I got to tell them all the time, like, it's not what it's cracked up to be. I mean, I've been working from home for almost 3 years in a hybrid model, and 100% for almost 8 months now. And I miss my colleagues. I mean, I love the opportunities I have to go into an office. So I just feel like there's this like awkward fear factor, and they're either like afraid to change and get into an industry that might like not be essential someday, or they're afraid of going into an organization and leaving a sure thing for a bit of a gamble. I think it's kind of all over the place, the reasons that the recruitment becomes challenging. Plus, I think because so many people are hiring and folks are just getting bombarded with just jobs. I mean, they're just like in shut off mode. Like, I am no longer checking emails. I'm going to push pause on that. Or, they've kind of just gotten irritated with it all. I mean, I've never seen so many like hiring now signs driving down the road.
I know. It's crazy.
It's maddening. And the amount of money people are paying for positions that 6 months ago they weren't. I'm thinking, why would you not take a job change? I mean, you're going to make probably 10 to 20% more money and on the new endeavor. But people are almost like, it's not even about the money. Changing jobs is stressful. I mean, it's nothing like moving a house, but it's not that appealing. Think about it. Like quitting a job you're happy at for something you don't know 100% about.
Yeah.
The gamble is a lot tougher for them to measure and understand because there's just so much uncertainty. I don't blame them. I don't blame them for being skittish or skeptic. I will be doing this the rest of my life, so I don't think about leaving a job. But for people that are figuring it out, God, I feel bad for them, because finding your place is what life's all about.
Yep. No, it's definitely a really interesting issue with like the fact that, I think if you want to get a pay increase, like you said, this is definitely the market to do it. But given the last year and just how things have been really unstable, like I think people really are craving like stability and even just like community in a different type of way. So walk me through, since you've been in recruiting, what are some of the changes that you've seen in just, how recruiters need to approach recruiting? Like, how are you finding candidates nowadays compared to how you were finding them, even as, 18 months ago, 2 years ago? Have you seen like a shift in how you find candidates and how you mentioned InMail's not working. What are some of the other things that you're seeing, and like how are you kind of training your team and approach to finding candidates, and what are some things that you're seeing that work well?
Yeah. I think, half of our business really relies on candidate inflow, right? For our contracts divisions, right? The temporaries, the contract to hires. So we've always relied on like job applications. In fact, our healthcare division just feeds itself because it's just a constant ebb and flow of people wanting work, and we've got it. And so it's just managing intake, right? When you turn that faucet off and you don't have that intake, it's a little stressful, especially when you're competing for job board space in that arena. Writing your jobs in such a way that would attract someone to even take the time to look at it. We used to be really heavy on Career Builder for years, and we've shied away quite a bit and more pivoted towards like Indeed, because we feel like that's the application a lot of folks are using. And the quickness in which someone will give you a bad review if they apply for a job and never hear back is delicate. So it's managing that communication. So you have to like almost communicate 3 times heavier with your applicant audience just to get a response, just to kind of get them through the process. We've always interviewed in person and assessed in person when our clients require it, and we haven't been able to do that this year. So everything's been virtual. Everything's been, send them assessments at home, have people take things from home. And so even the honor system has been something we've had to embrace, which, previous to that, it's not that we didn't trust them, but it's like proctoring for the CPA exam or the bar. I mean, the state's not going to let you take that from home. I mean, so all of the things that we did previous in terms of like, quality assessing, we've had to like reinvent how we do that alone. Onboarding an employee, never having met them, getting the proper documentation, making sure things are set in stone. It just takes so much more time on our end to do certain things because we're not doing it in person. And part of that layer of assessment is just being in someone's midst. It's not so much, you're sizing them up, but body language and tendencies. And I don't know, there's just that element that you're just not sitting in front of. So you can't rule it in or rule it out. It's just gone. It's just been eliminated from the stack. And that's tough because we've always relied on quality. And when you take away that sixth sense that we use, like our instinct in person, like how do you find a way to re-evaluate someone when you're doing it virtually? I mean, a lot of my coaching this year was just how to use Zoom and how to use Teams and Google Hangouts and Google Duo. So I think our way of finding candidates just got infinitely tougher, just logistics. And then from a recruitment standpoint, I mean, yeah, we've always leveraged LinkedIn, but I mean, it's all about referrals now more than ever. I mean, we place someone really good. We really delve in with them and say, is there anybody else in your circle? I mean, an eagle flies with eagles. So like, who else do you know? I mean, this is the referral industry at its best because the competition is so high, and giving someone a unique experience is like of the utmost importance. And so if I give someone a great experience, I'm hoping that at least gives me one more person on my Rolodex because I just lost one. I mean, it's just cutting even. So yeah, it's heavily related on referral because we're all competing for the same tech space and we're all competing for the same job boards, and it's muddy. And quite frankly, the people that I want to represent and work with anyways, I'm hoping are gainfully employed and probably not looking for a job. Those are the people I want to tackle anyways. And just getting them to open up to a conversation. I mean, it's honestly just best referral. I mean, that's what we've had to lean on probably pretty heavily for the past 6 months. I'd say since like Christmas, because Christmas was quiet. I mean, we were busy, but it was like nobody was moving. It was like the holidays.
Yeah, which I can maybe makes a lot of sense, especially this year. What about with I know like Robert Half and a lot of larger companies really big on like cold calling and phone time, things like that. Is that something that you are still like measuring, or like have you seen kind of like, okay, we've got to do, if we are gonna stick to cold calls, we've got to do way more now to get the same results. What are you seeing?
If I'm being honest, I mean, the only outbound calls we expect our team to make right now, because we can't fill the orders that we have, is references and ads. And even then on the ads, because of how long our team's been around and our firm's been around, most of the organizations that we see ads, someone in our team manages that account. So our amount of cold calls has always been pretty low because we've just had such a residual book of business for so long that we don't really ask it of our team. We haven't really had to, but I really have had them focus a lot more on referencing and focusing a lot more on, just being aware of the types of companies that are hiring, because honestly, that is what carried us through the recession. So if we're being proactive, that's the best way to do it, is keeping an eye on the industries that are starting to become more prevalent. I mean, cannabis is one that is like growing out of control, but there's this like, do we get involved? Do we not? Because once you go there, right, as a candidate or as a client, you've been there, and there's no coming out of that. And setting yourself up just to work at the cannabis organization in and of itself is difficult. I think the state has recently figured out how to, have them operate outside of just cash. But that's been huge in California. I mean, I don't know about the rest of the country, but we're in a highly conservative region, and cannabis is just like becoming this big thing. And so there's a lot of conflict there, and again, but the ads are telling us like what organizations are humming and drumming. And the summer has always told us a lot of things, HVAC and food processing and tomatoes, and we're coming out of cherries right now. we're always keeping an eye on the companies that are going through their ebb and flow, but then the ads are kind of what tell our team, the outliners, you know, the people that we weren't maybe expecting to be hot and busy right now. So, I mean, those are really the only cold calls that we tackle. And traditionally, and the Robert Halfs of the world will tell you this, I mean, we're rarely successful calling on ads the first 4 to 5 weeks anyways. It's usually weeks 7, 8, 9, 10 where they're finally like, all right, throw my hands up, can't do it anymore. Can I get your help? Which is unfortunate, because if we had been working on it weeks before, we'd probably be done. But then we got to start our process from square one. So it's just crap. And I enjoy cold calls just because I like the challenge. I don't even have time for it. I mean, if I had to make 10 calls right now, I'm going to make 10 outbound calls to a candidate that I need to talk to before I reach out to a company who's hiring, because I just want to fill what we've got. You know, I want to get people out there. So cold calling has not been my strong suit, or our teams for that matter, because you should have seen our staff meeting this morning. So many orders. Like,
well, I mean, that's what I'm hearing right now, is that just across the board, so many job openings. Yeah. Everybody's really, really busy. But again, it's that challenge is like, how are you connecting with candidates, and what are the strategies people are using? I'm curious too, like, so in terms of like bringing new people into the industry, what's your approach in terms of like training people up? Like how do you, I mean, and how do you guys run it? Are you guys full desk, or do you have split desks? Like, and do you kind of see full desk as something that, you know, really in the future isn't going to be around, or like what's your approach in terms of bringing newer people into the industry?
Actually, it's a good question, because we're doing it right now. Okay, so our approach with new hires on the recruitment side is not just like, here's how the software works. It's more or less learn what you're selling. You have to teach them how to assess the human, right? Like how to assess the candidate, because they're never going to be effective to a customer on a phone if they don't know what they're selling. So you're teaching them the product, and you're teaching them how to engage with the product. One of my biggest things, and one of the things that my first boss ever, Laura, taught me when I first got into recruitment, is I made reference calls legit for a week. It was like, hey, here's every candidate we interviewed in the last 2 weeks. And the best way to learn what they're really capable of is in the eyes of their peers, right? Their supervisors, managers, coworkers, whatever.
Yeah.
So references are so incredibly powerful, because one, it's a warm call, and it teaches the individual that you're working with or training to get on the freaking horn and make a phone call, instead of like, I'm gonna send them a text, or I'm gonna send them an email. Ugh, just pick up the darn horn. So it gets them on the phone, it gets them talking. Because the calls are typically warmer, it develops in the recruiter a bit of confidence that maybe they're not used to speaking on a phone all the time, and that takes years of practice, right? So, you know, we really do focus a lot on the fundamentals. Like, our search firm is based on these principles, right? Like quality, quality, quality. Like, we don't ever want to lie to anybody. We don't want to, you know, fluff up the truth. We want to be as hardcore honest as we can all the time. So it's teaching them the basics of like what we stand on. And then from there, building up their ability to interview and talk to a candidate and appropriately represent them, both verbally and in a written format. Because so much of where the world has taken us, we've gone away from a lot of the literary skills that I think kind of is what makes our search firm really unique, is the amount of time that we spend in a presentation on a candidate, whether they're entry level or on an executive front. I mean, we write very thick, detailed presentations on the individual, on what they bring to the table and how they're going to fit the company, not only from a culture standpoint, but from a skill. And so we're teaching our new recruiters, and some of the new ones that we've hired just this last year. I mean, this one incredible gal we hired, I mean, she is super smart teacher, right? And really has taken a liking to recruiting. And so we've spent a lot of time just honing in on those communication skills with people, getting them to get out of that interview process what we need in order to represent them appropriately. So a lot of it's just that front dialogue, and then again referencing them out, which solidifies what you identify in the interview, and making sure that it's on par, right? Because again, it's about accurate representation. So we focus there for quite a long time, and don't really release them into the wild until they've made a few good placements and we've walked them through candidate management, right? Like, hey, they're going to work late, or they're not doing this right. So we always start them out on the contract side and then build them up to working on more of that direct hire, right? Contract's a little bit less skin in the game, but gets the concepts down. So we really do focus on like learning inventory, like, because everybody's different, right? You just got to figure out how to deal with them all because they're wild.
Well,
that's where we start.
And I've seen more of a trend too, where, I mean, I've seen some companies are less likely to, or have kind of been less likely to hire new, people with zero experience in recruiting, because it's tougher to train people up, I think, now, because there's so many different ways to reach people. Like, to be honest with you, I think like if the phone was the only way to reach people, it's easy. Then the phone's the only way. But now it's like there's so many different channels, and everybody's fighting for the same positions. And you look at the job board, it's like, there's only like 5 job boards. So which one do we pick, and how do we write job ads? So I think bringing people into the industry, it's more of a challenge. And so for a lot of companies I've talked to, they'd rather just bring on somebody who has a big book of business, because then you don't have to train them in the basics, and maybe you just pay them more. So it's cool to hear that you're bringing people with zero experience, or with different types of experiences into the industry. Which is great to hear. And I know Cole just said, and this is kind of going back to what you said, he said it's a rite of passage to cry a couple times per quarter during your first year.
Oh my God.
It is so true. And then Adriana just said, Nicki is the best and such a great example. You got a lot of fans. I know.
Yay!
You got a lot of fans on here as well. And then Karen just said, where are those jobs? But then she just said, wow, great insight. And we have Howard here as well, who said, wow, great point. And guys, I appreciate all of the engagement as well. It's great to have you guys out there. If you have any other questions too for Nicki, definitely ask those. Look, this time has just flown by as well. And these times always do fly by. I'm curious, where can people, or what's the best way for people to reach out to you, and where, what advice would you have for people to get a hold of you, and just LinkedIn, or you got any other ways to get a hold of you?
Honestly, I leave my cell phone very public. I might be crazy, but I try to be as accessible as possible. So my cell phone is usually listed publicly in my LinkedIn profile. I check messages multiple times a day. Our company website, it has my bio and my contact information. So, text, call, message on LinkedIn. I have to communicate on so many different levels. I'm used to just figuring out what works for the other person. So if that individual's, a phone person, I call them. If it's a text, I text them. But I don't have a preference. It's honestly what somebody else would gravitate towards, and then I just roll with that.
Are you guys hiring right now as well?
Yeah, actually, we're always hiring, but we're actually trying to fill a couple internal positions right now. We've hired probably just 3 new positions within the last several months, and experience or no experience. It's all about the 3 A's: attractive, not like from a visual, but more of like are they an attractive personality?
Yep.
Like, do you want to talk to them all the time?
Yep.
Right. Aptitude and ambition. They have to have those 3 things in order to to be somebody I'm going to sit in front of and consider working alongside and putting in front of customers. So the aptitude piece is the hardest one for me to vet out right now. Hard to say, but I look for like life chapters that they've had to get through, like the ugly ones where all else was going to fail and they somehow came out on top. Or athletes, for some reason, athletes just tend to have the grit oftentimes that make them good in our business, because there's like a inner self-discipline and a teamwork feeling that you get with an athlete, right? They have to work with players that are talented, but maybe they don't like them, or work with players that are good, but you have to get along for the sake of the team. And in our business, we're very family oriented. So for us, it's like, that's huge. And the ambition, they've got to want more than where they're at. They have to just radiate like, there's got to be something better for me out there. I need more for myself. I have dreams. I have things I want to accomplish. And if that little ambition flame is like non-existent, you're never going to make it in recruiting, because our world is an evolution. Everything we hire is based on what's happening in the world. So you have no desire to like be a part of something that's bigger than yourself. You're probably going into the wrong industry, but that's my take, is the 3 A's. I focus on those. That's what I use to measure most internals. But yeah, you got those 3. Like, I'll have a conversation like with anyone.
Are you guys hiring across the country? Or do you got to be local candidates only?
Our clients are based here. So at all costs, we like to stay within the state because our customers are all based here, like, San Joaquin Valley, if you will, like probably more like Stockton, Sacramento area down to kind of north of Fresno a bit, where I'm from. So our clients are based here, but we've moved people from other parts of the country to come here. I mean, selling the Valley is not that tough. Affordable cost of living, and we're close to San Francisco. We're close to a lot of like larger cities, but it's so much easier to live here. It's simpler, slower. So we've relocated people to our area a few times, and it works really well because we have a lot to offer. It might be hot, but we got good wine and good skiing and good food and mountains and oceans and Disneyland, and we got everything in California.
You sold me with the good weather. You sold me, because here in Wisconsin
right now it's like 80,
freezing.
I think, outside. It's crazy. Yes, I'm wearing a sweater, but I'm always cold. But yes, the weather here it's a dry heat. So people, they don't like humidity. Valley is your friend, so it's not a hard sell. And there's good schools. And like I said, it's like the Midwest in the middle of California, basically what we are. So
I love the Midwest.
And I love. Yeah, me too. So
well, awesome. Well, hey, if you're out there and you're interested in the recruitment industry and you're local to Nicki, definitely reach out. But if I would just say, get connected to Nicki on LinkedIn, and definitely stay connected to her. One of the questions I like to ask, just in kind of wrapping things up here, is if you were to give any piece of advice to somebody who maybe is going through a tough time right now in recruitment. Maybe it's just having struggle with finding the right candidates or dealing with counter offers, whatever those issues are right now. What is one piece of advice that you'd give to recruiters that really helped you get through some of the tough times that you've gone through throughout your career? What would that be?
Well, something that I posted about in early January was, kicking the hustle culture. Oftentimes in recruitment, you can get that burnout feeling where you're just like, God, I'm not doing anything right. I'm running a hamster wheel. Take a day off. Like, just take a freaking day off. Because our job is so heavily appeasing everyone. We're constantly making deposits in other people's bank accounts that sometimes we lose sight that, like, we are a vessel too. And you got to feed that sucker in order to kind of stay enlightened. And so that's like one thing if you're feeling a lot of burnout. And then two, depending on like really where you live, if you haven't sat down and like really thought about all the people's lives that you've touched along the way, reach out to somebody like a candidate or a client that you might be really close to and just go freaking have a meal with them, because they will remind you why you're in this business, and you'll be looking dead at an example of somebody that, you know, you made an impact on at a tough point in their life. And sometimes you just need those little reminders that what you do has a lot of value and a lot of merit. And sometimes it's hard to admit that. So when I'm having like a tough day or a tough time, I reach out to people that I know at one point or another, I really helped them get through a tough time. And then I just kind of go spend time with them myself, just to remind me of like my premise and why I exist, because it isn't for me. It was for them the whole time. So sometimes having those little moments and reminders that, you know, what I do isn't for me, it's for them. Sometimes just seeing it and how it's blossomed is a good reminder for me. I like to share meals with people. I mean, I think that's kind of my way of, even if it's over Zoom, you know, I like to break bread. And that's probably one of my things I enjoy doing. And it brings me back to center. It's just kind of taking a break from the madness and just sitting in front of someone that you care about and are proud of. It's a good reminder. It helps you out a lot.
I love that. That's probably one of the coolest answers I've heard. And I think that really that, I don't know, that kind of encapsulates why you've been so successful in recruiting, because you care. I mean, if you can go out to meals with people you've placed and people you worked with, I mean, that shows the strength of relationship that you have. And I love that. I think it's a really, really cool answer. And, you know, I would encourage anybody, particularly like the burnout part. I think it is super easy to just get burned out. Yeah. Again, working from home is the easiest. It's so easy to get burned out because you almost feel like you have to overcompensate. You have to work harder than you would in the office for some bizarre reason. But I think within our industry, sometimes it's taking that reset, connecting with the people that you've actually impacted. And if you can bring yourself back to that, then it gives you perspective on where you're at. So I love that. I think that is a great piece of advice. Well, hey, I don't want to take up too much more time. I know we've gone a little bit over here, but I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. And this was this your first time on LinkedIn Live? Awesome.
LinkedIn Live first time, podcast first. I kind of overthought it going into it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just like singing in an interview. Why would I be that angst about it? But I feel like, because you never know what's coming. So you're kind of like, yeah, I like not having to rehearse anything. It was good to just speak off the cuff, because quite frankly, I mean, that's what I want candidates to do. I guess I should expect it of myself, right?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it, and I'm glad that we were able to do this. And let's see, we got Sandra just said, she said, that's so kind of you. I think that was when you were saying about just being accessible to other people. And then Peter just said, thank you both. Really insightful. Needed this. Peter, we appreciate you, and everyone else who's out there. Really appreciate the engagement. Again, if you've got, if you're not connected to Nicki, connect with her. And then next week we'll be back with another guest on Monday. So I'll give that announcement on Friday. And if you know, or if you're, open to being on LinkedIn Live as well, definitely reach out. But Nicki, it was great. I'm glad we got to experience the LinkedIn Live, and I'm glad it was easier than you thought it was going to be.
Oh, and thank you. Yeah, it was great.
We'll have to do it again in the future.
All questions. Yeah, anytime anyone wants to chat about that stuff.
Just don't DM just by sending a resume. That's what we always say, right? Like it's like the worst thing you can do. But awesome. Well, I'm gonna end this broadcast. And again, thank you to Peter, Sandra, Karen, Adriana, Whitney, Cole, and Christy. Great to have all of you guys out there. And again, Nicki, thanks so much.
Thanks.